One stolen horse was all the cowboy wanted back. He followed its tracks deep into Apache territory, certain he was riding into a deadly trap. Every warning told him to turn around, but he refused. When he finally reached the camp, no one reached for a weapon. Instead, the Apache chief stepped forward, looked him in the eyes, and revealed a truth so unbelievable that it changed everything the cowboy thought he knew. What happened next shocked not only him, but everyone who would later hear the story. The first light of dawn spread across the wide valley as Shun Carter stepped out of his small ranch house with a cup of hot coffee in his hand. Every morning followed the same quiet rhythm. Before the sun climbed over the distant hills, he checked the fences, greeted the cattle, and visited the stable where his faithful chestnut horse waited with a gentle nicker. The horse, named Rusty, had carried Shun through storms, long cattle drives, and lonely nights across the open land. To Shun, Rusty was not just an animal. He was a trusted friend. That morning, something felt wrong. The stable gate hung open, moving softly in the morning breeze. Rusty's stall stood empty. A length of broken rope rested on the ground beside fresh hoofprints leading away from the ranch. Shun searched every corner of the property, calling the horse's name until his voice echoed across the hills. There was no answer. Only silence. He knelt beside the tracks and studied them carefully. They were fresh. Rusty had not wandered away on his own. Someone had taken him. The trail stretched toward the Rocky Mountains where Apache families often traveled with the changing seasons. Several neighbors arrived after hearing the news. They examined the tracks before exchanging uneasy looks. One older rancher placed a hand on Shun's shoulder. "If those tracks lead where I think they do, let it go. One horse is not worth risking your life." Shun looked toward the distant cliffs glowing beneath the rising sun. He remembered every mile Rusty had carried him without complaint. Walking away was never an option. "I am not chasing trouble," Shun said quietly. "I am bringing my friend home." He packed a blanket, water, dried food, and a small bedroll before saddling another horse. Without anger in his heart, but with determination in every step, he followed the fading hoofprints toward the distant mountains. As the ranch disappeared behind him and the open prairie gave way to rugged country, Shun realized he was riding into a place few outsiders ever entered. Whatever waited ahead would change his life forever. By late afternoon, the open prairie gave way to steep hills dotted with pine trees and towering rocks. Shun followed Rusty's hoofprints through narrow trails that wound between cliffs and shallow streams. The tracks were still clear, giving him hope that he was close. As the sun drifted lower in the sky, a thin column of smoke rose in the distance. Shun guided his horse to the top of a rocky ridge and looked down into a quiet valley. An Apache camp rested below. Small lodges stood in neat rows beside a flowing creek. Women prepared food over cooking fires while children laughed as they played nearby. A few older men repaired saddles and tools beneath the shade of tall trees. Warriors moved carefully around the camp, keeping watch over their families. It was not the fearful place many stories had described. It felt peaceful, organized, and alive. Shun took a slow breath before riding down the hill. He knew every pair of eyes would be watching him. Before he reached the center of the camp, four Apache warriors stepped forward. Their faces remained calm as they quietly surrounded him. Shun raised both hands to show he carried no harmful intentions. "I have come looking for my horse," he said respectfully. "That is all I want." The warriors exchanged brief glances before one of them nodded toward the largest lodge. Moments later, an older Apache chief stepped outside. His hair was streaked with gray, and years of wisdom showed in his steady eyes. He studied Shun for several seconds before speaking. "You have traveled far," the chief said. "A tired traveler should eat before asking questions." The unexpected kindness caught Shun by surprise. He accepted the invitation and sat beside a warm fire where a simple meal was placed before him. No one rushed him. No one threatened him. The quiet respect shown by everyone around him slowly eased the tension he had carried all day. After the meal, the chief stood and motioned toward a nearby meadow. "There is someone waiting for you." Shun followed him across the camp. As they reached the edge of the grass, he stopped in disbelief. Rusty stood peacefully beneath a large cottonwood tree, grazing as if nothing had happened. The horse looked healthy and strong. A clean bandage had been wrapped around one front leg where a deep cut had clearly been treated with great care. Rusty lifted his head the moment he saw Shun. With a joyful whinny, he trotted across the meadow and gently pressed his nose against Shun's shoulder. Relief washed over Shun. He wrapped both arms around his faithful companion, grateful beyond words. The chief smiled quietly before speaking. "Your horse was never our prisoner," he said. "We found him frightened and injured after several horse thieves abandoned him in the hills. We brought him here because every living creature deserves care." Shun looked from Rusty to the chief, realizing that everything he had expected was wrong. Before he could find the right words, the chief spoke again. "But the horse is not the only reason you were meant to find this camp." Shun looked at the chief with quiet curiosity. The old man's words lingered in the cool evening air as the camp settled into a peaceful silence. Families gathered around small fires, sharing stories and laughter while the last light of the sun faded behind the mountains. "The horse brought you here," the chief said, "but another path began many years before today." He slowly walked toward a large oak tree at the edge of the camp, and Shun followed. The chief rested one hand against its rough trunk before continuing. "Many winters ago, a terrible storm swept across these mountains. Snow covered every trail, and food became scarce. One night, a young rancher found our camp. He saw that our children were hungry, yet he asked for nothing in return. He left sacks of flour, dried meat, blankets, and medicine before quietly riding away." Shun listened without speaking. We later learned his name was Samuel Carter. Shun's heart skipped a beat. "Samuel Carter was my father," he whispered. The chief nodded. He never spoke of what he had done because he believed kindness did not need applause. He helped us because it was the right thing to do. Shun lowered his eyes, remembering the lessons his father had taught him as a boy. Samuel had often said that a person's true character was revealed by how they treated strangers. At the time, Shun thought they were only simple words. Now he understood they came from real experience. "For many years," the chief continued, "I wondered if his son carried the same spirit." He smiled gently toward Rusty, who stood peacefully nearby. "When your horse arrived injured, fate gave us a chance to learn the answer." Shun looked around the camp once more. He no longer saw strangers. He saw families who had protected his loyal companion and honored a kindness shown long ago. The chief stepped closer, his expression thoughtful. "Your father gave us hope when we needed it most," he said softly. "Tonight, I would like to offer you a chance to continue the friendship he began." Shun had crossed the mountains expecting to reclaim a horse. Instead, he had just uncovered a part of his father's life he had never known, and he sensed the chief's next words would change his own future forever. The chief invited Shun to sit beside the evening fire once more. The flames flickered gently as the camp grew quiet beneath a sky filled with bright stars. "My people have long believed that trust is built one person at a time," the chief said. "Your father opened that door many years ago. I believe you can keep it open." Shun listened carefully. "There are ranches nearby that struggle through dry seasons," the chief continued. "Our hunters and gatherers know these mountains well. We know where fresh water can still be found, and your people know how to raise strong cattle and horses. Instead of living as strangers, we could help one another." Shun thought about the fear that existed between the two communities. He knew many would question such an idea, yet he also knew what he had witnessed with his own eyes. These people had rescued Rusty, cared for him, and asked for nothing in return. He smiled and reached out his hand. "If both sides are willing to listen," Shun said, "I will do everything I can to bring them together." The chief accepted the handshake with a warm smile. "Then you are leaving with far more than your horse," he said. "You are leaving with a friendship that can grow for many years." As the fire glowed softly between them, Shun realized his journey had become something far greater than he had ever imagined. In the weeks that followed, Shun kept his promise. He visited nearby ranchers and shared the truth about what had happened in the Apache camp. At first, many were doubtful, but his honesty slowly earned their trust. Before long, small groups began meeting to exchange knowledge, lend a hand during difficult seasons, and build friendships that had once seemed impossible. Rusty was always by Shun's side, a quiet reminder of the journey that had started it all. Every time Shun looked at his faithful horse, He remembered that he had ridden into the mountains searching for something he believed had been stolen. Instead, he had found respect, understanding, and a connection that reached back to his father's kindness. Years later, people no longer remembered the story as the tale of a missing horse. They remembered it as the day one brave cowboy chose trust over fear, proving that a single act of courage can open the door to lasting friendship. Sometimes the greatest journeys begin with something we think we have lost. Shun set out to recover one faithful horse, but along the way he discovered the lasting value of kindness, trust, and the power of seeing people with an open heart. One thoughtful decision created a friendship that reached far beyond a single day and reminded everyone that respect can bring people together even after years of misunderstanding. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more original Wild West stories filled with courage, unforgettable adventures, and inspiring moments. Share this story with someone who believes kindness is always worth the risk. And before you go, leave a comment below and tell us, what would you have done if you were in Shun's place? Would you have followed the trail into Apache territory, or turned back? Thank you for watching, and we look forward to sharing another unforgettable frontier story with you in our next video.